So we're reading from Srimad Bhagawatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 16, Text 22. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Dharmasya Te Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Dharmasya Te Bhagavatas Triyuge Trabi Svahi Dharmasya Te Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Vadbihish Characharam Idam Vijadevatartam Padbishcharacharamidam Vijadevatartam Nunam Britam Tadabhigati Rajas Tamas Cha Nunam Ritam Tadabhigrigati Rajas Tamas Cha Nunam Ritam Tadabhigrigati Rajas Tamas Cha Satvena No Varadaya Tanuva Nirasya Satvena no Vardaya Tuna Venirasya Satvena no Vardaya Tuna Venirasya Dharmasyate Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Dharmasyate Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Padbishcharacharamidam Dvija Dvaivartartam Nunam Britam Tadabi Gachati Rajastamascha Nunam Britam Tadabi Gachati Rajastamascha Sadvena no Vardaya Tunave Narasya Sadvena no Vardaya Tunave Narasya Dharmasyate Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Dharmasyate Bhagavatas Triyuga Trabi Svahi Padbishcharacharamidam Vijadevatartam Padbishcharacharamidam Vijadevatartam Nunam Ritam Tadabhagati Rajastamascha Nunam Ritam Tadabhagati Rajastamascha Sadvena no Vardaya Tuneva Nirasya Sadvena no Vardaya Tuneva Nirasya. Others?
Dharmasyate Bhagavatas Triyuga Tribhisvai Padbishcharacharamidam Dvijadevatartam Nunam Pratam Tarabhikati Rajastamascha tamascha.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya. Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham.
Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya. Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham.
Characharamidam vijadevatartham.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya. Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai.
Adhischaracharamidam vijadevatartham.
Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya.
Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya. Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai. Dharmasya te bhagavatasya yuga trivismai. Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham. Adhischaracharamidam dvijadevatartham. Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha. Nunam vritam taravigati rajastamascha. Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya. Satvena no varadaya tanuvanirasya.
Dharmasya,
Dharmasya,
of the personification of all religion.
of the personification of all religion.
Te,
Te,
of you.
of you,
Bhagavata,
Bhagavata,
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Jayuga,
Yuga,
you who are manifest in all three millenniums.
you who are manifest in all religions.
To be,
To be,
by three.
by three,
Svai, your own.
your own,
Padvihi,
Padvihi,
feet.
feet,
Chara, Aksharam,
Characharam,
animate and inanimate.
and
Idam,
Yam,
this universe.
this universe.
Vija,
Vija,
the twice born.
twice born.
Devata,
Devata,
the demigods.
demigods.
Artam,
Artha,
for the sake of.
the sake of
Nuna,
Nuna,
however. Ritam,
Ritam,
protected.
protected.
Tat,
Tat,
those. Feet. Apagachiti, destroying. Raja, the mode of passion. Tama, the mode of ignorance. Cha, and Sadvena, of pure goodness. Na, unto us. Vara, Daya, bestowing all blessings. Tunuvea, by your transcendental form. Nirasya, driving away. Translation. O Lord, you are the personification of all religion. Therefore, you manifest yourself in 3 millenniums, and thus you protect. this universe, which consists of animate and inanimate beings. By your grace, which is of pure goodness and is the bestower of all blessings, kindly drive away the elements of rajas and tamas for the sake of the demigods and twice born. Please repeat. O Lord, you are the personification of all religion. Therefore you manifest yourself in 3 millenniums, and thus you protect this universe, which consists of animate and inanimate beings. By your grace, which is of pure goodness, and is the bestower of all blessings, kindly drive away the elements of rajas and tamas for the sake of the demigods and twice born. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord is addressed in this verse as Tri Yuga, or one who appears in 3 millenniums, namely the Satya, Dwarpa, and Treta Yugas. He is not mentioned as appearing in the 4th millennium, or Kali Yuga. It is described in Vedic literature that in Kali Yuga he comes as a Chana avatar, or an incarnation, but he does not appear as a manifest incarnation. In the other yugas, however, the Lord is manifest incarnation, and therefore he is dressed as Tri Yuga, or the Lord who appears in 3 yugas. Sridhar Swami describes Tri Yuga as follows. Yuga means couple, and Tri means 3. The Lord is manifested as 3 couples by his 6 opulences, or 3 couples of opulences. In that way, he can be addressed as Tri Yuga. The Lord is the personality of religious principles. In 3 millenniums, religious principles are protected by 3 kinds of spiritual culture, namely austerity, cleanliness, and mercy. The Lord is called Tri Yuga in that way also. In the age of Kali, these 3 requisites to spiritual culture are almost absent. But the Lord is so kind that in spite of Kali Yuga's being devoid of these 3 spiritual qualities, he comes and protects people of this age in his covered incarnation as Lord Caitanya. Lord Chaitanya is called covered because although he is Krishna himself, he presents himself as a devotee of Krishna, not directly Krishna. Devotees pray to Lord Chaitanya, therefore, to eliminate their stock of passion and ignorance, and the most conspicuous assets of this yuga. In the Krishna conscious movement, one cleanses himself of the modes of passion and ignorance by chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, as introduced by Lord Chaitanya. The 4 Kumaras were cognizant of their situation in the modes of passion and ignorance, because although in Vaikuntha they want to curse devotees of the Lord, since they were conscious of their own weakness, they prayed to the Lord to remove their still existing passion and ignorance. The 3 transcendental qualities, cleanliness, austerity, and mercy, are the qualifications of the twice born and the demigods. Those who are not situated in the qualities of goodness cannot accept these 3 principles of spiritual culture. For the Krishna conscious movement, therefore, there are 3 sinful activities which are prohibited, namely illicit sex, intoxication, and eating food other than prasad offered to Krishna. These 3 prohibitions are based on the principles of austerity, cleanliness, and mercy. Devotees are merciful because they spare the poor animals, and they are clean because they are free of contamination from unwanted foodstuff and unwanted habits. Austerity is represented by a restricted sex life. These principles indicate by the prayers of the 4 Kumaras should be followed by the devotees who are engaged in Krishna consciousness. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Tasmai Sri Sri Caitanya Mano Vistam Shabitam Nirabudle Svain Bukara Maidam Dadanti Svavadantikam Bande Ham Shri Guru Shuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Raghunatam Samtam Sajivam Shri Radha Krishna Badaha Saha Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidam Scha Hey Krishna Kunasundhu Dina Bando Jakapate Gopisha Gopikanta Radha Kanta Nipsate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vinamnishwari Rishabhan Sudhidevi Hari Pranami Hari Pray Vancha Kalpa Jivascha Kripa Sindhu Devicha Pitanam Padmibil Vaishnavel Namo Namaha. O Lord, you are the personification of all religion. Therefore you manifest yourself in 3 millenniums, and thus you protect the universe, which consists of animate and inanimate beings. By your grace, which is pure goodness, and is the bestower of all blessings, kindly drive away the elements of Rajas and Tamas for the sake of demigods and twice more. So, I'd like to welcome everyone for coming to class. And by listening to the words of the pure devotee, hearing the purports in the text, one makes advancement and one purifies one's existence. So we see in here the 3 kinds of spiritual culture of cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. And we can understand that Prabhupada, when he's speaking about cleanliness, he talks about the external, right? External, we must be very clean. It's described that Brahmanas often will take a bath 3 times in a day. One knows to be externally very clean is very important. It's understood even from a practical point of view that it maintains proper health, right? When areas are not clean and people aren't properly cleaning, they actually develop diseases, right? So, but when Prabhupada refers to this idea of cleanliness, he gives it the term, he says, revolutionary clean, right? Revolutionary clean externally, but actually internally as well. So this is also very focused, because if one is just externally cleaning oneself and not internally cleaning oneself, it's not complete. So we understand that by cleaning internally clean is by following regular principles, chanting Hare Krishna, engaging in devotional service. Anyone can cleanse one's consciousness in this way. And so we can understand this is a very important part of spiritual culture, is being very clean and engaged in devotional service. And it's very interesting too that Prabhupada gives within this purport, he talks about the 3 prohibited activities of illicit sex, intoxication, and he says non-prasadam. And that's a very important point, that it's not just non-violence or violence against animals, it's prasadam. Because even if one's food is, you could say in the mode of goodness, in the sense of taking just vegetarian foodstuffs, that if it's not offered to God, it's still sinful, right? So oftentimes, many people that may be vegetarian or vegan may be very proud of their situation, that I am so great because I'm not engaging in violent activity, which is definitely good, and it's a very important activity as a foundation to take to spiritual life, but in of itself can still be material if it's not offered to God. So this is a very important point, that whatever one has, whatever one does, one should offer it in the service of God. So similar with one's vegetarian foodstuffs, one shouldn't be too proud of just being a vegetarian, but one should actually offer everything to God, right? And so it becomes spiritualized. That it's even said that if one takes prasadam, that one can go back to Godhead, right? And this is what I'm hoping on, right? If I can get enough prasadam, hopefully I can go back to Godhead. This is my ticket to back to Godhead. Otherwise, I'm going to have lots of difficulty.
Eating your way back to Godhead.
That's right, eating your way back to Godhead. But we can also understand that, I think this is kind of comes into the modes of activity of sattva-gun, tamagun, and rajagun, or I should say sattva-gun, rajagun, tamagun. That we know sattva-gun is the mode of goodness, tamagun or rajagun is the mode of passion, and tamagun is the mode of ignorance. And so, what would be, I'll pose this question to anyone that would like to answer in the audience. We can name some of these activities, right? To describe what these activities may be. What would be activities in the mode of tamagun? Oversleeping, because everyone needs essential rest, but over too much sleeping, right? What else?
Uncleanliness.
Uncleanliness. That's good because it refers to the verse.
Intoxication.
Intoxication, yeah, not being conscious of oneself. Laziness, being lazy. How about activities in the mode of rajagun, passion?
Working out.
Working out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Making money.
Okay.
Going to a nightclub.
Well, also, it can be indicated as Rajgun as in the mental sense that one wants a certain position, right? He works really hard to attain a certain position in life. He works hard to work up the corporate ladder in a particular way. He wants to be known and recognized. I am so great. I am so wonderful. I've done so many things. Please recognize me. Please put my plaque and my name at the university, so even when I pass away, I'll still be remembered, right? So oftentimes this is the mode of passion. And so what would be activities in the mode of goodness?
Veganism.
Sorry?
Veganism. Vegans.
Yeah, that could be definitely a mode of goodness, yeah.
Meditation.
Meditation. So some other qualities might be nonviolence, keeping clean. What's that? Ahimsa, yeah, non-violence is this idea is coming out of India. It's very interesting with the particular idea of ahimsa is that Gandhi, as everyone knows, himself, his mother actually came from a Vaishnava tradition, but I think particularly in those days that some of the smarter Brahmins said that if you leave India and you go over to Europe, then you're considered contaminated and you lose your caste. So he went to England to study law, so he was considered he lost his caste. So many of the smartas, Brahmins at the time, rejected him. So then he kind of got into Jainism, which in itself is not Vedic. It's outside of the Vedic understanding. It's not Hinduism, but their main emphasis is nonviolence. And what's interesting is that he impressed the world with one aspect of getting rid of the British, was non-cooperation with the British, that led to the British leaving. There's other factors, but that's one factor, and he's known for that. So other leaders like Martin Luther King would read these literatures of Gandhi and how do I engage in social action that's productive for society. So he was a big proponent of this. And so it's actually coming through society now that people often talk about this often. We talk about in devotee circles of ahimsa milk, of having ahimsa dairies for cows. So because we can understand that the modern day dairy industry is pretty much not different from the meat industry. In one sense, it's actually even worse. So we understand this concept of ahimsa. So all these activities are actually really important to know. We have to know if ourselves in our daily life, what activity are we in? Are we in the mode of goodness? Are we in the mode of passion? Are we in ignorance? And so and we actually know in one sense, even in the material sense, a sattva guna can still be material, right? Even if one's in the mode of goodness, it can still be material if it's not used as a springboard to transcendence, right? We can understand that the mode of goodness is like a springboard when you're kind of diving into the water. It's like a springboard and helps you to dive into the ocean of devotion, right? But in and of itself, if it's just doesn't transition into transcendental sattva guna, then it can still be material. In the sense of one of the downfalls, they say, of someone just being in the material sense of sattva guna is that one becomes very proud. Oh, I'm so nonviolent, and I'm very clean, and I'm a vegetarian, so I'm better than you. And so a lot of the false ego kind of kicks up. And so that's why it's so important that one must continually practice this humility. So one should use this sattva guna as a springboard into transcendence. It's kind of like in the sense of you go to an airport, right? And so really some beautiful airports. I think even LAX has updated their airport in a sense. And I think there's even an airport somewhere in Asia where they have all kinds of gardens and plants. And Singapore, yeah. Singapore has this like really far out airport. Like you can go there and just like, you can just like live there. It's so beautiful, right? But the point is that the point of going to the airport is to go to your destination, right? You don't just go to the airport and say, wow, this is like a beautiful place, let me just hang out here. So similarly in the same way, that the mode of goodness is a springboard for transcendence, to engage in devotional service, to understand devotional service. Otherwise, just to stay in that, one still stays in the material world. So you have to actually go beyond sattva gun into sudasattva, meaning activities engaged in devotional service to the Lord. So all these things help us springboard into transcendence. Therefore, that's why we wake up early, so we read the scriptures. One of the activities of the mode of goodness is one develops knowledge, right? And one engages in activities to help others without expecting anything in return, right? But the point is that we have to continually purify the mind, otherwise the other modes sneak in some particular way. And so we must be very vigilant of the mind, right? Because the mind is described in the Bhagavad Gita as one's best friend or worst enemy. And for the uncontrolled mind, it becomes one's worst enemy, right? So we understand devotional service in of itself is actually very simple, right? The point is that whatever you're doing, you just engage it in service of God. Very simple process, right? It doesn't really matter whether one is in the Varnashram system or the Varnas, whether one's a Sudra, Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya. This is not the point. The point is that whatever you're doing, you should engage it in the service of God. So we always have to be vigilant to the mind, because the mind is always kind of giving us trouble. Like one of the things I really loved about when I first started reading Srila Prabhupada's books, was they're very clear, to the point. There was no kind of like guessing, right? For me, I was into like kind of impersonal literature, and you are me and I am you, and all these particular things. And particularly when you deal with different like Zen poems and things like that, it's a lot of riddles. So it's not always clear to understand what they actually mean by a lot of things. But that's what I loved about Srila Prabhupada's books, is that he was clear and to the point. There's no second guessing what Prabhupada did, because he was so strong in what he would say. And so in his books, in his literature, it's very clear in an instructional guide in how to reach transcendence. And so the development of our Krishna consciousness is developing these activities of sattva guna. And then we actually know to transcend to transcendental activities. And that we can see here that even the four Kumaras, it says here, let's see. It says the four Kumaras were cognizant of their situation in the modes of passion and ignorance, because although Vaikuntha, they wanted to curse the devotees of the Lord. So it's interesting when we think about the four Kumaras. They're like the pure devotees, but they had these activities here described as they were described in the passion of ignorance, being in Vaikuntha. So one would wonder, if one's in Vaikuntha, if one can even reach Vaikuntha, why would they be engaging in these activities? Well, later on it says, since they were conscious of their weakness, they prayed to the Lord to remove their still existing passion of ignorance, the three transcendental qualifications: cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. So you see here, that is a great example that the four Kumaras were great devotees. And that really, this is instructional for us. That even if we have obstacles in our devotional service with, Tamagun, Rajagun, Sattvagun, if we have these difficulties, we have to pray. We have to pray to the Lord with great sincerity. And if we're sincere in our attempt to pray to the Lord answers all prayers. That the real thing is that Krishna is giving us everything really what we want. We just don't realize it. But if we really want Krishna, Krishna gives us that. If we kind of want Krishna in some way, he kind of gives us that. If we're kind of in between, he gives us exactly that. If we don't want him, he puts us in a position where we won't want him. That he gives the atheists, kind of the loophole, like you don't have a desire to even want to know God, so therefore you won't know God. So similarly, Krishna is giving everyone what they want at every moment. So the ultimate answer is that we have to simply surrender under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that just means just engaging our mind, words, and activities. That's Sri that we can understand, and even though that the process of devotional service can seem maybe very difficult to some degree, if one merely stays in association with devotees, one can gradually purify one's consciousness. That we may not necessarily become pure devotees overnight in order to go back to Godhead, but if we stay with the process of hearing and chanting and remembering, it's only a matter of time. And as it's said that one should, it's a very interesting analogy that Prabhupada gives sometimes, is that when one's going hunting, he hunts for the rhinoceros, right? And why is that? Because most people would acknowledge and say that it's almost impossible to do that. Rhinoceroses are the most fearful animals in Africa. But the idea is that one is bringing oneself up to the highest standard, and that even if one doesn't reach that particular standard, he's still going to reach a better standard than if he didn't reach that high for a standard. So the point is that we should always constantly be striving for the highest standard, but if we don't reach that standard, at least we'll reach a higher standard than not putting ourselves up to that level. And that we should also understand that devotional service is very simple, but sometimes due to the uncontrolled mind, we have difficulties in our Krishna consciousness. But all hope is there because if we continually just stay in associated devotees, anything is possible. And we can understand here that these are the big problems in society, right? We see that the illicit sex and intoxication and the lack of mercy in society are great problems, right? We see that when a society is engaged in illicit sex, it causes big problems in society. This was the whole argument that Arjuna, right? Arjuna gives to Krishna, which he gave really great arguments, right? He said, if I engage in this warfare, I'll kill so many men on the battlefield, and then the women will be without husbands, and they won't have someone to protect them, and then there'll be unwanted progeny. And with unwanted progeny, you have chaos in society. So we see in modern day Kali Yuga, this is the problem, right? We find most people that are in prison for long periods of time are coming usually from a single parent household or no parent household, and they had to kind of figure out what to do on their own on the streets. And so basically they had no proper training, and so they feel rejected within society, and so because they feel rejected, they put out their own negative emotions on society, and they end up doing destructive things. So we see that Arjuna gave actually great arguments, but ultimately he surrendered to Krishna for the higher purpose. And so we can see how these simple activities are very important within society. We say intoxication. We say one of the leading causes, particularly now, is the opiate crisis, right? So many people taking opiates, right? And particularly where I'm from in Florida, they had such a huge problem there. And that, people, just teenagers and very young people were like overdosing on opiates, right? Due to this problem. And can be a huge problem in society. And we understand mercy, having no mercy. That it's quite well defined that when people engage in slaughter of animals, it destroys the environment, it's not good for one's health, and it destroys the mercy within a personality. That one has to give up these activities before he can have any kind of good intention. And it's very interesting that society itself tries to cure so many problems by another problem. Similar in the sense that now we have a particular Democratic president, and an office, and he's all for taking care of the environment, watching environmental regulations. But at the same time, what he does is he gives so much money to the agribusiness, right? And he supports the meat industry in particular ways. And we see that this is a leading cause of environmental degradation. That if you know, and this is kind of a symbol that you can see where many politicians, they're always kind of seeking the approval of the people instead of doing what's right. And this is the biggest problem with democracy, right? The biggest problem with democracy is it's not really kind of based on what's right or wrong. It's whoever has the most power, right? Whoever the people choose as a person elected. But oftentimes, what is the qualification of those people, you know, putting people into office? They don't really have great qualifications themselves, and it's just kind of based on their own material desires. And so this is one of the greatest criticisms that I think it was Plato that he criticized democracies, because he said people that vote for the majority oftentimes don't have the proper knowledge and understanding of how to vote. And so we see this results in a chaos in society. So this is a very important point, that those that are engaged in animal slaughter, and what that also means is that anybody that is engaged in activity, whether one's actually eating it, whether one's transporting it, whether one sells it, or anything that has to do with the slaughter of animals, that one will have extreme karma because of that. And then we can actually understand that COVID-19 is a result of that as well. And we see even other viruses like the swine flu, I think was in the early 90s. These were all results of dealing with agribusiness or dealing with animals in a particular way. And even the leaders of society, even the scientists, a lot of people recognize these things, but somehow they can't put two and two together. They try to fix the problem with something else instead of dealing strictly with the problem. I think even the WHO, the World Health Organization, acknowledged that the coronavirus is coming from some bats, and that it came to other animals in the wet market. Wet markets in China in particular are just all kinds of exotic, very extremely exotic animals that even people don't hear of. They put them all together in a very warm room, and they're all chained up, and it develops all kinds of bacteria within there, that all kinds of things happen. And even when COVID hit, it was interesting that a lot of countries in Asia, particularly like Taiwan and China, they were kind of already on top of it because they're kind of used to it, and so they're able to deal with it a lot better. But we can see in the WHO recognized that this was a problem, but yet at the same time, they weren't ready to say we should close down these wet markets, right? They were saying, well, no, you can continue with the wet markets, continue keeping them open, but just do it in a more different way. Sorry. So they themselves, and these are like educated, highly educated, PhD, you know, type, very intelligent people, but still they can't see the very simple basic things. And this is an understanding of being in a particular mode of energy. And so that's why it's so important to recognize these particular modes, because even if someone gives, say, Srimad Bhagawatam, or gives proper instruction to a particular person that's in a particular mode, it's hard for them to understand it. And it doesn't even matter what kind of material qualifications they have. But they could be highly intelligent, highly qualified, but if they're in a particular mode, it's very difficult for them to understand basic, simple concepts. So similar in our own lives, we have to continually engage in this Krishna consciousness, but we should always be on eye of where we're at. Really see where we're at, like how are we feeling in a particular day, and how are we reacting with all types of individuals. We can see is that, am I upset, and why am I upset? And to really look at these things so we don't maybe engage in activity that we may regret later on. And if we continually engage in hearing, chanting, remembering, and reading Srimad Bhagavatam and continuing the devotional practice, then we can get outside of the modes of material energy and actually reach Krishna consciousness. And if we don't, like I was saying earlier, even if we don't go back to Godhead in this lifetime, if we continually are working at our devotional service in this life, we'll have a better opportunity in our next life. So there's no loss, diminution, and engaging in the process of hearing and chanting. With that, we should continually engage in this process and be very mindful and in every situation where we're at. Because they say that spiritual life is like a razor's edge, right? A little bit of inattention and one gets cut, right? And we all experience that. Anybody that has to work outside or has to deal with non-devotees oftentimes, it's usually you get into trouble when you're the least attentive, right? So one has to be attentive at every moment, right? At least practice trying to be attentive. And so we have to be very conscious and aware, and that's why that's why it's called Krishna consciousness, is to be aware of all our activities in every situation. And you're really seeing where we're at. And even if we see the narcas within our hearts, the difficulties that we may have, that there's nothing wrong with that. If we acknowledge our faults, then we can actually do something about it. But if through the false ego, we deny our faults, then we can never change it, right? But if we see, hey, look, I have this particular issue, I have a hard time getting up, or I need to work on it in the process. That's the thing. And you can't criticize someone that's in the process, right? If someone's very dirty and then you shower, and you say, well, this person's so dirty, like, what's his problem? He takes showers, it's not dirty. No, he's in the process. It may take some time. He may not get it right away, but he's in the process. So at the same time, we have to be compassionate, understanding that the mistakes that we do make, and before we can show compassion to anyone, we show compassion for ourselves. But we just have to be thoughtful of where we're at and how we can make gradual advancement. And by making gradual advancement and advancing Krishna consciousness, we actually attract other people to Krishna consciousness. Because it's not so much what we say, but who we are, right, that really attracts people. People oftentimes are attracted to great lectures and intelligent things, but what really reaches people is their hearts. So if they could, just by purification of the heart of Krishna consciousness and really seeing where people are at, we can attract people, and we attract people through the heart, and then the rest follows. Are there any questions? Come.
Well, it seems that mode of goodness is mandatory to get to Shuddha Sattva. And then from other side, it is also said you don't change your creation. So if somebody is engaged like Kshatriya, if somebody is like a police officer, devotee, or military, does it need to cultivate mode of goodness? Because it seems like it will interfere with his activity.
That's a good question. When one engages in a particular activity, whether it be sattva-gun, rajagun, tamagun, he may be engaged in that particular activity. It doesn't necessarily mean he's attached to that activity, right? For example, sometimes Srila Prabhupada would have to get very heavy with some of his senior disciples because he could see that they weren't getting it through plain explanation, so he would like maybe get really heavy with them, yell at them, but he would always do it to get their attention. But it wasn't necessarily that Prabhupada was in the mode of passion. He was just acting in the mode of passion to get his point across. There's so many particular ways and material that we live in. If we're in sattva-gun sometimes in particular circumstances, it's hard to get certain things done, right? Like if you see someone about to attack the temple, or he's about to attack you, you don't have time to say, this is not for your best welfare, and that you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to incur karma. You don't really have time for those particular things, but you understand that I have a particular duty to protect the devotees, protect myself, and that to unleash the most amount of violence that I may need to protect myself or protect others. But it's not necessarily that that person themselves are in that particular activity, the mode of passion. Like oftentimes many martial artists, right, they talk about this, right? They say that the best fight is not to get into a fight, right? A really good martial artist, someone that really knows how to fight, he'll say the best fight is not to get into a fight. But if you have another choice, another option, and you're forced, then you should give it your full effort. But even then, it's not necessarily that you're in that particular mode, because that person is controlling their mind and senses, and they're so trained in a particular martial art they may be in, that they can control their mind and senses, and they're just doing it to defend themselves. So externally, even though something may seem in a particular type of mode, it's all really about the consciousness. Because even you could say, Vishnu maintains, so he's in the mode of goodness, Shiva's described that he is, and he described the mode of he's in that mode of ignorance, right? And or Tamagun, and Brahma is in passion, right? Because he's got to create things. Because those particular activities, you have to have certain abilities in order to get them going. In order to create something, you have to have lots of energy and just to get something off the ground. It takes a lot of energy and passion to get it going. But it's not necessarily you're attached to it. I think the main point is that someone's not attached to a particular mode, but he uses particular modes to get things done. Similarly, like Lord Shiva, he's not in the mode of ignorance, but he deals with a lot of people in the mode of ignorance to where their level is at. And so, in similarly, Vishnu's, he's the maintainer, because we understand that anyone that lives in a temple, that's been in a temple for some time, it takes a lot of work just to maintain something, right? To maintain beautiful deity worship. It takes a lot of work to maintain a temple, just to make things look nice, right? You have to maintain things, and it's a lot of work to do that. And so and by doing that, it develops a particular mode of goodness. But the main point is that someone's not attached to a particular mode, but he has to act in a particular mode in order to get something done. Does that answer the question?
So basically what you're saying is that if somebody keeps hearing him chanting, even though he is engaged in, let's say, activity as like being military or police officer, he can gradually become a Arjuna.
Yeah, that's the whole point that Prabhupada gave us, is that, you know, when Prabhupada came here, he was dealing with the counterculture at the time, so many hippies, and they were engaged in so much kind of abominable activities, that Prabhupada was very patient and kind and understanding. He just said, you know, come and take prasadam, because you know that they, you know, no one could get the philosophy first, just take prasadam. And they take prasadam. It's very interesting too, because, you know, Prabhupada's like, you know, I think 70 in New York. He's got a small center, and he's got people coming for programs, and he's basically like cooking the feast. He's advertising for people to come. He gives the lecture. They listen to the lecture. He serves out the feast to all the people that come, and because a lot of them maybe were uncultured, they just kind of leave, and Prabhupada's cleaning everything up. And he's doing this day after day after day after day, knowing that if prasadam is the secret weapon, as Prabhupada describes, and that even if people can't accept philosophy, if the food's good, they'll accept it. And it's only a matter of time till they accept other things. So for those that are unthoughtful, prasadam is a good way to introduce that. But then eventually people, they be more inquisitive than just the food, and they understand the philosophy, and they develop gradually. Like for some people, it may be a very gradual process. For some people, they come, like we've seen it many times, people come to Krishna consciousness, and they just like, you know, like they were living their past life. They chant very nicely, or they really take the chanting. I think it was said that Bhakti Swami, when he first came to Krishna consciousness, he misheard that you had to chant 16 rounds a day. And so I think it's something like he started chanting 32 rounds a day. And he was like getting up, and he'd have all his rounds done for Mangalarti. And so there's certain people that they just take to it. You could see in previous lives they take the Krishna consciousness. But even someone that's just starting in this life, that if they just gradually do simple things, like just come to the temple, do a little service, take prasadam, they can make gradual advancement. That's why if we feel overwhelmed, like, oh my God, there's so much here, like, how can I do all this? No, you stick with the associated devotees. You continually try to come to the Bhagawatam class, associate devotees, chant as many rounds as you can, do whatever you can in devotional service, and you'll make gradual advancement. And now, if one wants to increase that, then one gets very intense into Krishna consciousness, just like anything, right? If you want to be a good musician, if you want to be good at anything, you devote your full self into it. And those are the results that you get out of it as well. So similarly, if we devote ourselves fully to Krishna consciousness, we can experience pure devotion, right? It's just a matter of our sincerity and our desire. And if we're, because due to contamination or whatever it may be, that's okay too. Because if we just stay, even if we just stay in the association of devotees, we'll gradually make advancement. So there's opportunity and hope for everybody, no matter what level or wherever you may be at. It's just a matter of putting yourself in some kind of active position in Krishna consciousness. And it may be some people are in positions where they can't come to temple on a regular basis. So Okay, you can go online. You can read books. There's so many things you can do even if you don't have access to devotees. Having associated devotees doesn't necessarily mean just a physical thing. It can be a mental thing in the sense of reading Prabhupada's books. So in the sense that a lot of us never really had opportunity to meet Srila Prabhupada. But we can really get Srila Prabhupada's association by continually reading his books and understanding him and following his example. And we can perfect our lives through that. But even again, if we can't fully take to pure devotional service, there's no loss. Because whatever you've done in devotional service is to our eternal benefit. And then our next life, we can start off where we left off. Yes?
How do we maintain internal cleanliness?
Well, there's many things. Continually reading, chanting, hearing, remembering, serving, observing the deities. There's unlimited things we can do to cleanse ourselves of the unwanted desires. And again, if we continue just gradually, even just stick with the process every day, we'll get that pure devotion. It's just the material mind and material desires not engaged in Krishna consciousness that kind of hold us back. But the purification process is very simple and sublime. And then sometimes it can be very difficult, right, to get purification, right? Like, I think I've experienced it many times. I remember one time I was in Los Angeles, and I was like, then they had like this really heavy thing about distributing books. It was like, you had to distribute like 10 books, you had to like distribute 20 hardbound books and collect $100 or something like that. And sometimes I would come back and then I'd get the sauce. And I remember one time this senior devotee, he was giving me the sauce so heavy, So much so that if anyone is familiar with the area, they have like these apartments, and I think like a couple apartments down, there's like where people live. And so like one apartment down from where we were at, he was like yelling at me so much that other people could hear it. And so they went to the temple president and said, well, like this guy's being kind of heavy and that. So at the time I was like kind of real mental about it, and I got real upset. And I think also I was kind of giving it back to him. But so I was kind of disturbed for a while, because like, oh my God, what happened? And then, and even like, I would say I was probably almost on the verge of tears. It was that heavy. But then later on, we kind of made up and became friends, and it was fine. But in retrospect, I look at it and I think, well, maybe on his side it wasn't like the best way he could have approached it, but at the same time, it was very purification for me. It was purification to test my sincerity. Did I really want to go out and distribute books? Am I just doing it on an artificial level? But am I really doing it that really, give it my all? Sometimes we get into particular habits of not giving everything that we can give. And sometimes we need help. And then Krishna sends or puts us in certain situations that helps us surrender more. And so at the time I had difficulty, but in retrospect I look at it and I think that's exactly what I needed. I needed some very harsh, very heavy person telling me this so I could be more sincere. And I'm not, this is one of these warnings is don't try this at home. But the point is that any situation or difficulty that's happening to us, oftentimes we see good situations as favorable things. Like, oh, this is great. I'm joining the Kirtan, wonderful prasadam. That's easy to do. But unfavorable situations, right, where maybe a devotee is giving us a hard time, or someone's pointing out certain flaws that we have, we kind of want to defend that right away. And then sometimes you may defend that, but it's always good to be introspective in any situation you're in. Think that, is there anything I could learn from this situation? Anything smallly and remotely that I can learn in this particular situation? And if there is, that's beneficial. So we should see even difficulties in Krishna consciousness can be great manifestations to make intense advancements. And we can see this, right? The Srila Prabhupada experiences too. Prabhupada, the pure devotee, came to New York City. And for the first year, he struggled, like anything. He'd never seen snow, and he's like seeing snow. And I think the first person he met was this very crazy, drug-addicted person that actually chased after him. And he had so many struggles. But he saw these struggles as just to test the sincerity to push on the Krishna consciousness movement. So much so that he understood. He was sitting on a park bench, and someone came up to him and asked him about what he's doing. He said, I'm starting this. And this was before he had made any disciples. He said, I'm starting this international society that will spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So he could already see in his mind that this was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. He just had to plug away, and Krishna would give the results. So similarly, we may have difficulty in Krishna consciousness, but if we continue to stick in the process of devotional service, it's only a matter of time where success will be there. We just have that vision. And as it said in Bhagavad Gita, Matra Sparshasta Kunteya, Shtosha Jukata, Agno Kuntas, Tamtitik Shastra Bharata, that, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearances, the happiness and distress, in due course, are just like it's just like the winter and summer seasons. They rise out of sense perception, O son of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So the material world is made up of that, right? There's always going to be difficulties in this world, in all shapes, forms, and ways. So it's not a matter of whether we're going to run into difficulty, or we're going to have difficult times. It's really how will we be prepared. It's like we shouldn't ask for the ridiculous God to come. We should pray to the Lord that give me the strength to face these difficulties with a proper perspective and making devotional advancement. Anything else?
Just it's good to have a mentor.
Mentor.
Yes, somebody doesn't be good, somebody who's
Yeah, that's a great example. Mentor is very important because that shows the practicality of how the philosophy can light up. And the greatest mentor is Prabhupada. Like often we need physical mentors, obviously, people that are practicing on a daily basis. The mentors don't necessarily have to be someone that's alive. It could be the pastimes of Lord Caitanya. So, but yeah, thank you very much for those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What verse was it? 22?
22.
This is your dog.
Is it?